All right, guys, welcome back to Comics Only, the only podcast where comedians talk about comedy with other comedians. My guest today is writer, comedian, and owner of Stir Crazy Comedy Club, Tom Sims. How you doing, man?
I'm good.
Good. I really appreciate you being here, dude.
Absolutely, of course.
It was cool that you reached out. I would have actually asked you sooner, but I wouldn't want to bother you. So.
No, it's no bother. Nobody ever asked me.
Really interesting.
No. Is this mic in here?
Yes, that's you. You want it up or down? Down.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know actually much about how you got started with comedy. How long have you been doing comedy now?
I think I started in 2008.
Yeah, wow, long
2009,
time ago.
something like that.
Here in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, you lived in Phoenix your whole life.
No. We moved here in 2007.
Oh, but you love it here. I've heard you talk about how much you like it. Okay, cool. So where was the first spot you did comedy here?
The first time I went on stage?
Yeah.
There used to be a great Wednesday night show called The Hidden House.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I went up.
Cool. I guess my first question that comes to mind is, what are the big differences you see in the Phoenix comedy scene pre and post pandemic? Because a lot of people have said it's like way different than it was before, and I'm kind of curious about that.
As far as the scene itself?
Yeah, they said there was more independent rooms, more mics.
Since the pandemic?
No, before the pandemic.
Oh, well, I mean, when I started in Phoenix, there was only 2 clubs,
Sure,
and maybe a couple of mics, and so that's a huge difference. I mean, now you can pretty much go up any night of the week,
right? Yeah, you can.
But that back then it was tough. I mentioned the Hidden House. That was a weekly show, and it was a good show. It was ran by comics, and it was a good show.
Well, I'm here to tell you, it's obvious from your club how big a difference it makes when comics understand and run the room.
Sure, yeah. But even then, to get on that show, it was, they would book it 2 months out. It was tough to get stage time back then.
Yeah.
And like I said, there was only a couple of clubs, so
there's like 7 now.
Yeah, and a ton of independent shows, which is great. I mean, now's, it's a much better time to be starting out just because you can get so much stage time.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard me talk about this. I've talked about it a few times on the podcast. I've talked about it with people a lot too. I've realized over the last year, I think I may want to run a club.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to be a touring comic. The more time I spend in my car here in Phoenix, the more I realize if I'm not meant to be maybe a road dog. And the idea of having a center of community where you could still do comedy and hang out with comedians and be part of the scene.
Yeah.
Really appeals to me, I think.
Well, here's what I would say about that.
Yeah.
If you're talking about opening a club,
yeah,
that changes everything for you.
Right, of course. Yeah.
So I would say it's comedy is tough. It's a lot of work to stay good and all of that. And opening a club is a lot of work.
Yes.
I was pretty much done with pursuing comedy when I opened the club.
Interesting.
But a lot of people, they open clubs because they think it's going to further their career, and obviously you get more opportunities. But running any business, but a comedy club is a lot of work. It takes up a lot.
Right,
of
like
time,
if you
open
a club but just keep trying to be a comedian, the club's just gonna fail.
I don't know that. I just don't think you have enough time to really pursue comedy.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And it changes everything. I enjoyed being a comic. I enjoyed hanging with comedians and talking comedy and all of that. And as soon as you open a club, it's just different. You're not just a comic anymore.
Right.
Every conversation is now, this guy owns a club and I want to get booked. So everything he says is funnier. Everything he says is just wisdom. You know what I mean?
It's got to be annoying in a weird way. Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I was the same person,
Of course. Yeah. We all are.
Well, I was a comic, so all of the things that I see, all of the other things from this vantage point now, and if I was doing, if I was doing an open mic and one of the managers or owners of a club walked in, it was like, oh my God, so and so's here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just you have to I had to get my head around. I'm that guy now.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of the fun out of it. Just hanging out and talking comedy. There's always that. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to bust my balls. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because they're worried that I might get mad. So it just changes. Like,
Yeah.
So when you say that you still wanted to be part of comedy by owning a club, you
like,
are.
be careful.
But it just changes the nature of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's the thing is I don't necessarily want to do it for a position of power. I don't want to like lord it over people. And it's not like what you do.
No,
either,
you don't want to do. I mean, I started producing my own shows. And I found that I enjoyed it, the production of it, the customer experience. And when you're running your own shows, you're kind of limited to the space that you're at and what they'll let you do. You
of
know
course,
what I mean? So,
absolutely.
And I just, I wanted to control everything and try the things that I thought would make a good room and all of that.
Yeah, and it sure has, man. The way from the seating's arranged, like. It drives me crazy when I go to a club and they have those picnic style tables. I was at one of the big three last night to see Sam Talent. And in the middle of his set, he goes, "These fucking picnic tables are ridiculous. Why did they do this to you?" He's like, "Did you guys all want to watch a show like this for an hour?" No. And he's in the middle. It's the middle of his set. I was so appreciative.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of those little details. I had worked some other clubs, and you kind of start picking up on those things, and you think, oh, if I had my own club, I would do this. You know what I mean? And eventually, you have such a long list that you're just like, I'm going to do all of these.
Those little lights that you have that change colors.
Yeah.
Like I was telling Devin Hannock last night, every club should have those.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Well, I mean, because I'm used to them. You know what I mean? It's
right.
if you're at a club watching a show and you don't have that, you're kind of used to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you have to like yell for a waitress or something. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, distraction's the enemy of comedy, and if you're distracted because you're trying to get a beer, you're not enjoying the show.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. I don't know if you've heard, there's a club up in Seattle that just booked a bunch of controversial comedians. Do you know Legion of Skanks by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know the club you're talking about.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinions on that whole situation? I don't think it's actually that complex. They just should have researched more before they booked them. Like, I think it's reasonable to not want those guys there.
It's that whole thing is just a tricky thing,
Yeah.
I'm sure they were under a lot of pressure to do that. Yeah, that's a tricky one. Fortunately, we haven't really run into that kind of a thing. On that
sure haven't here. Yeah.
I mean, ever so often.
Yeah.
I guess a few times as I'm thinking back, there's been an issue with a comic or two, but it's. I don't know, man. That's a tough one. It just depends on the personality of the club. I mean, who you book is a reflection of the club,
Yeah.
And I would just
I know the people that run that club. They're really good people. And I'm sure they had like good intentions, both when they booked the comics and when they canceled it. So that's what I trust. But it sucks that things like that are going on in the comedy world.
Yeah, I think the way I come down on, like, if you're a club that's booking a big name, Bill Maher, right? If you go to a Bill Maher show, you know what you're about to see.
Absolutely.
Right? But a club my size, Stir Crazy, most of the headliners, people don't know who they're coming to see.
Right.
They're just coming
you're
to see
drawing
comedy.
an audience that you've built. Yeah.
Right. But what I mean is that the headliner
is unknown, right?
Right. So if you come and it's, you don't know what you're getting into, that's a different thing than if you're coming to get what you're expecting.
Yeah.
So I kind of have to, I never tell any headliners what to say or not to say. I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I've had comics that, they walked half the club.
Yeah, before the headliner gets up even. Or
well, I'm talking about headliners.
Oh, sure.
And it's like, well, bruh, I can't have you walking half my customers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to have them back, but I would never tell them, hey, don't say that or don't do. I'm not going to do
You just
that.
don't book them again. Yeah,
Right. I have no choice. I can't have half my customers leaving.
Of
You know what
course.
I mean? I can't afford it.
No, of course.
The idea is to get people to come in and enjoy it. So
Yeah,
it's
you
just
want
a
them
little
to
bit
tell their
different.
friends that it was a good time.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I tend to, it depends on the comedian. Like I just had Lori Kilmartin, and she's pretty political,
great.
but she's fantastic.
Yeah.
So even if you disagree with her, you're still going to laugh because she's that good.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But not all comics can pull that kind of stuff off. You know?
Right,
And,
true,
and I'm not
true.
talking just about left comics. I've had more conservative comics that, that people that are on the other side of the spectrum get mad. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah, it's a rough.
I resent any comic when I can tell they're pushing a political agenda. It's like fine if you want to talk about politics, but there's
Yeah.
enough wrong with both sides.
As
that,
long as it's funny.
right,
you
make
know?
it funny and like honestly, dump on both sides. If you can't dump on your own side a little bit, talk shit about what you believe too. Like that's all people want. As soon as you can be a little self-deprecating, they'll go with you on the other jokes.
Yeah. Or it's just, for me, it just comes, just be funny.
Just be funny.
know.
It's a good rule in comedy.
As long as,
yeah,
even if I disagree with someone, as long as it's funny,
absolutely.
But I don't know. It's just a strange time.
No, that's a good rule. Just be funny. You started you had a band before you started comedy. How much overlap do you think there is between like the different entertainment industries, and how much did you learn from music that helped you in running a club?
I think a lot. I mean, when I was a musician back, when I was young, in the 80s, you had to do things yourself. There were not very many venues, and, there was no internet.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about producing shows. We would, as teenagers, we would rent out this hall, and we'd have to hire a sound man and advertise and figure all that stuff out, as teenagers. So a lot of things I think helped me as far as production and,
Sure.
The customer experience and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, the customer experience at Stir Crazy is great right now. From the
Thank you.
You also have those mics that hang from the ceiling that kind of just make everything a little bit more.
Well, we use those for recording and stuff like that.
Oh, really? Okay. Those aren't picking up like laughter or anything.
Well, no, they're audience mics.
Sure,
but if you because when we record from the board, but you can't hear the audience, so that's not a very good tape to have if you can't hear the audience laughing. So those pick up the audience, and then we mix them together.
Yeah. What are the criteria for the contest, for the Stir Crazy contest?
The funniest person in the universe?
Yeah.
There's no criteria. I mean, it's
No, I
open
meant
to
like
anybody.
when the judges are grading. Like, what are the different?
Well, I mean, that's
Because Mike B. Dapper just posted the one for, I think, House of Comedy, it must be.
funniest person
and-
with a day job, I think.
Yeah, and it was kind of striking to me. Like it was like originality, stage presence, all these things. But at the end of the day, I didn't see anything that translated to like amount of laughter or like how well you did. And I thought that was like kind of interesting.
So,
Maybe they make notes on it or something.
yeah, so I've judged that a couple of times. They had some criteria that they wanted you to rank each comedian on. I think
Right.
it was I remember it was 1 to 10 or 1 to 20, something like that. And excuse me, there was like 4 or 5 categories maybe specifically. But the way we do it at Stir Crazy for ours, it's we don't tell the judges to do anything. Whatever you want. And we try to we have 3 judges, and then the audience votes, and that's tallied as one vote. I think we do a professional comedian, somebody in the industry, and then just like a civilian person not involved in comedy. Usually it's like one of our regular customers will bring in or something like that. And they just have to pick which ones they want to go through. They don't rank them.
Mm-hmm.
They just say, we want these 5. We think these 5
That's
are the
awesome.
best. Whatever.
That's a good
makes
way
them.
to do it.
Yeah, I hated doing contests when I was a comic,
They suck.
So, yeah, and so when we decided to do this one, I wanted to make it as fair as possible, and all the things that I hated about contests to try to alleviate those.
Sure.
So we did the best we could. You know,
Yeah.
obviously you can't do everything.
Hey, it's
you know.
another set in a sold out room. Anybody complains.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can't make everybody happy, but we tried to do it as
yeah.
fair as possible. You know, everybody automatically gets accepted into it.
Yeah.
As long as they send a video of them telling jokes.
Right. Okay.
It doesn't have to be on a stage. As long as you're telling jokes, we don't want a bunch of nonsense. But
Yeah.
as long as you send a video telling jokes, you are automatically eligible.
Right.
And then when we close it, the system randomly picks the 90.
I really love that you check the videos to make sure they're telling jokes before you let them in. That's a good,
Well, you know, you just
it's a
so
good
it's not.
policy. No, yeah.
You know what I mean? This
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
stand-up comedy contest. You don't have to be you can be brand new, but
Right.
we want to hear some jokes. We don't want to hear you know.
Yeah, it already attracts enough lunatics as is. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, so they're randomly picked, you know, and that's a big conspiracy theory every year too.
Sure.
But you know, they are picked randomly. It assigns them on their night randomly, and I tried to make it as fair as possible.
Yeah.
You know.
What'd you think of the chill room the other day?
I like the
clean
space.
open mic? Yeah, it's a cool
I like the
space.
space.
I heard there's a lot of bookers there.
Well, I was there. Randy Hausner was there. Tony Visick was there. It's just randomly. I mean, I didn't
It's
know
like
those guys were going.
Oh, well, I guess they're more so the two kings of clean comedy.
Randy is, yeah, for sure. That's his whole thing.
Is that not? Is Tony's show's not all clean?
I don't think so.
Oh, really?
I don't.
Okay,
I
I
don't
don't know.
think
I was
they're,
under the impression, but that might be just,
I don't think so.
okay.
Maybe, but
Huh.
so yeah, it was just a random thing. I like to go out and watch shows. You know, I like to go. My wife and I, we go to open mics.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard you go to Sean McCarthy's room. I love Sean.
Yeah, he's not. That's not too far from my house.
Sure,
But I
that
have
makes
a, you know,
sense.
a special place in my heart. You know, it was
Yeah.
around back when I started, or almost when I
Right.
started.
Yeah.
So
it's one of
you
the
know,
longest running rooms around. If
Yeah.
not the, well, I mean, Tempe Tavern just shut down, so it might be the longest running room around.
Yeah, it was.
Did you have you ever been to Tempe Tavern?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I know the name, but
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if I've ever
it
been there.
was-
That's kind
it
of
was
a journey for me.
Tough room, man.
Yeah.
Just
I'll
never
do-
anybody in there but comics, and for whatever reason, the culture was like, we're just gonna talk to ourselves
Oh,
and
yeah.
ignore you. It was just
Combat
like,
comedy.
I don't know why.
I used to
come
love
here.
those kind of mics.
Me
though.
too, kinda. It's important to do rooms where nothing matters, where
Yeah.
you can kind of just get loose and
Those kind of rooms always kept me in the moment. You know, it's
Yes.
like, okay, these people don't want us here. How can we make
'em
something
laugh
happen? You know,
anyways. Yeah.
I used to love those, and that's where you get good. You
It
know?
makes you a way better comic.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, you'd be able to, you know, if you can handle those rooms, you know, when you get
Absolutely.
a club gig, you know, and the crowd is there on your side right out of the gate. I mean, it makes those, you know,
Yeah, you can tell when people stop doing bad rooms. They just drop down a level in their ability. I'm convinced of it because I'm in bad rooms all the time, and I could just see it. You know, like I'm not talking like super experienced comics. I'm talking like open micers at my level. Like, there's definitely, I'm sure, when you've done enough time. Like, I'm not talking about people like Brian, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm talking about there's open micers at my level that just go to Stir Crazy, and if they get on, they have an okay set. Just go to Mic Drop and do the mic there, but you never really see them in the bad rooms, and they always just kind of do okay in the clubs. They never really.
yeah.
But then there's people like Aldo and Matt Delgado, where it's like, even though they get great opportunities, they're out there at the horrible open mics with
Yeah.
us, bombing, trying new material.
Well, you're working your craft, you know, and
Yeah.
and even the worst of the open mics, you can still get something out of it.
Yeah, of
you know?
course.
And like I said, I always liked those. A few months ago, my wife and I went to a show, and it was one of those mics. I mean, nobody was paying attention. There was nobody there. And I asked, Darrell Johnson was running it that night. I asked if I could go up.
Yeah.
I was like, I miss these days
That's
where
awesome.
nobody cared because, you know, nobody knew
fun.
who I was. So
Yeah.
it was, so I was, there's 3 people maybe paying attention. I had no agenda. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I was like, I miss these days. I want to do this. And I went up.
That's really cool. That's what excites you about being a
Well,
comedian.
I mean, when I don't
You're
get
like,
that
oh, the room's
opportunity.
horrible. I'm going up. But there's comics that would be excited to go up and then see that type of room and be like, no, I'm not going up.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
cool that you're the opposite. It's
But even back when I was, you know, when I was going to those mics a lot, I would, you know, if it was, send me up first. I went up first. I, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just had fun doing that kind of stuff.
I think it's because you know those are the spots that make you better.
Yeah.
That's how you get better at comedy. You can go to Stir Crazy and crush for a sold out room, and that's an expression of how good you are. But you get to that level of good by going up in bad rooms, going first, and trying to capture an audience that actively hates you.
Yeah. Well, I think when you get booked a lot for paid gigs,
Yeah.
you kind of get your act, the jokes that this is what I do, and you can kind of get into just telling them without even paying attention. You go on auto.
Yeah.
But in those kind of rooms, you can't go on auto.
No, you sure
You
can't.
got to figure it out. And to me, that was always just kind of fun.
It's fun. It's better. Brian was telling me you guys play a game where you give him a word,
Yeah.
and he has to work it into his.
Yeah, we used to do that. We did it the other night.
I'm gonna start doing it with Devin Hannock
at the thing you just
yeah
asked
the
me about.
chill room.
Yeah. We just did it again. We used to do that back in the day when we were on shows together.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
Because it makes you be in the moment, just like you said. It
Totally.
makes you be in the moment.
Totally.
And even if it just does well with you, because
Oh,
that's still fun. He's watching for just your reaction when he says whatever he says about it. Yeah.
But there's a rule though. You can't just blurt it out. You have to work it into a joke
Of
that
course.
makes sense. You can't just say it. That's cheating.
Say the word right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
right.
he got the biggest laugh of the night, and it was me because of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna start doing that with people.
Yeah, it was
Why
fun.
Not? How do you feel about comedy festivals?
I think they're great. I always liked them. You
Cool.
get to network. So much of comedy, well, anything really in life, but especially comedy, so much is networking.
Yeah.
You meet people from other cities, and, they can hook you up when you're coming to town. You hook them up when they come to town, and that's just, it's like anything else. The more people the more opportunities you
It's
get.
so true.
And I always enjoyed them. Some are better than others. But I went to every one that I could.
Nice.
Because I enjoyed it.
I like it too. It's a great time. I mean, the ones I've been to, the shows are usually like not well attended, except for like a few exceptions.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I didn't get to do a lot of them. But and some have more industry,
Right,
which is I like going to festivals now because I get to see comics that I've never heard of, never seen before.
Right.
And that's part of the fun for me. If I get to see somebody I've never seen and they make me laugh and I get to offer them a gig, that's fun. I like
Awesome.
that. You know? So yeah, I enjoyed when I was a comic, and I like going to them now.
Cool. Yeah. Did you hang out at Big Pine?
I did.
Nice.
I did.
Yeah.
I went this year. Yeah.
Cool.
That was one of my
Missed it this
favorites when it was up in Flagstaff. That was fun.
Yeah. Did they not have anything up there? They just moved Big Pine down here, and no, there's probably not a festival in Flagstaff anymore.
I think Jamie Anderson tried one last year. I don't know the status of that,
okay,
though.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, somebody should.
They
it's a great
should.
location.
It's great to have festivals in places where there's not a lot of industry, and then also if it could be somewhere like where the tourism surges the population for a period of time. That's
yeah. If the town gets behind it, it's great.
Yeah.
like San Luis Obispo Comedy Festival.
I've heard
that's
it's
a great
great.
one.
Yeah.
That was a blast. And the town seems to support it, and it seems like it's a big deal when it happens. And I was in it once or twice. I had a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun hanging out with like 100 other comics
Absolutely.
at once. You're running around town, just constantly running into people.
Yeah.
It's
for
really
sure.
fun. I went to a comedy festival. I've been 3 times now in Eureka, California at Savage Henry Comedy Club. It's always just a good time, but it's just basically a party.
Yeah.
For 3 days with 100 comics.
Yeah.
Take over the town.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
It's fun.
Yeah. How much do you feel like there's still space for irreverent comedy?
Irreverent comedy?
Yeah, like I don't it's not so much here in Arizona, but there's this political correctness thing. And do you think it's more of a pendulum where it's swinging?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see, as we're it's swinging back that way where stuff that you shouldn't say is going to be funny again.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you couldn't say it.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, interesting. Distinctly because of that.
Yeah. And you have generation that kind of grew up at that time where they couldn't hear this stuff, and now they're getting older, and now it's shocking to them.
Yeah.
Stuff at somebody at my age, it's like, well, it's not shocking because I used to hear that all the time.
Right, right.
So it's different for younger people because they haven't heard some of this stuff. So I think it's
Yeah.
that's what society does. It swings back and forth.
Because that's like kind of my more natural sense of humor is to kind of be wild like that. And I don't want people to think I'm a horrible person because of that.
I think most people are, in your culture, friends, you joke around and there's context. And that's the problem with social media is you can take one little piece out of context and this is all of it right there. Well, that's not all of it.
Right. Exactly.
So I think we're getting, we're figuring our way through all of that as a society, I think.
Yeah. I think so too. I hope so. It feels like I don't know. It feels like people are saying retard more. I don't know. It feels like it is swinging back. It feels like anybody hasn't been canceled in a while.
Yeah.
Especially people that didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
Like if you do crimes, there's only so much people can help you. What I just had something, but spacing on it. That's okay. What are your goals for the club? Just keep drawing in more people. Are there any? I'm trying to think. There's not. Would you ever want to open another club?
I'm not sure. I've almost got involved in some other clubs a few times. I don't know.
You know what you could do? What I would love for you to do is to be a consultant for clubs where even if people didn't necessarily have you as another, even if you weren't an owner, if they would design their club based on this general style.
Well, I mean, I don't know any more than any other comic knows. Do you know what
Sure.
I mean?
That's
It's like
probably true.
we all know low ceilings, everybody faces. We all know that stuff. It's just I had an opportunity to do that stuff.
Sure.
Now I'm a little over attentive to details, so I get into the excruciating details of things, and maybe I'm wrong about it all, but that's what I do. So, it's there's so many comedy clubs. My wife and I, we travel a lot, and I go to clubs. I've been to a lot of comedy clubs, and I like seeing how they do things.
Yeah.
And I'm not precious about what we do at Stirker. If I see somebody doing something operationally or whatever that I think is better, we're going to do it now too.
Right.
So
of course.
I'm always looking for good ideas.
Would you ever want to run a bigger club?
No.
No.
I've had that opportunity as well. I'm just not interested in that. I specifically wanted a smaller club. I think, in my opinion, comedy is an intimate art form.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I specifically, I would like Stir Crazy if I could get a little bit bigger financially, but I wanted a small venue. I wanted a small club with intimate seating and all of that. I specifically wanted that. So if I ever did another club, it would be that kind of a situation too.
Well, that puts you in kind of a cool space for your relationship with the comedians you book, because you're really giving a pretty big opportunity to a lot of these people, because they're not people that are known.
As far as the headliners or locals, you mean?
Both, but I imagine like if you're on your way to being a headliner, rooms are like Stir Crazy are your first stop.
Sure, yeah. It's kind of the blue collar level. If you're not famous, big clubs aren't going to book you.
Exactly.
So the headliners that come to Stir Crazy, they've been doing it a while. They go every week. They're good. They're going to kill, and they have a week of work.
Right.
I think there's more and more smaller clubs starting to open up, and I hope that continues, because a lot of the bigger clubs, they have the bigger names, or they have YouTube stars and stuff like that. So, it's just I don't know.
It's hard. It's hard for unknown comics, and it's hard to get known without opportunities.
Yeah,
so the fact that clubs like Stir Crazy exist is huge. It's like you said, it's the blue collar comedians that get to work there.
Yeah, in the sense that they're just not household names,
for the most part. I was stoked I got to meet Tom Takar there. That was awesome.
He's great.
He's so great.
He's great.
He's really
and
funny.
he's somebody that I happened to stumble on.
Yeah.
In I forget what city he was in, but I was like, this guy's great.
He's
you
so
know?
funny.
Yeah, yeah. That's fun.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And
You get some pretty big names every now and then. Like, they're big names to comedy people, but the fact that you got Jackie Cashian and Lori Kilmartin are both huge. I saw them together back in Eugene.
yeah, they're great.
They both Yeah, they're so funny.
Yeah.
And then Tom's, obviously, he's pretty big. Like, he's on the cusp of famous.
Yeah,
sure.
We've been fortunate. I've gotten bigger. Jackie and Lori usually don't do rooms my size. I'm a very small club. You know, so I've been very fortunate.
Does
with
being
some of the
close
names.
to LA help with that?
Absolutely,
Absolutely,
it does. It's a quick flight.
Yeah,
because my budget is my budget. So I've been very fortunate. And it's one thing. Booking. I would say booking isn't checkers; it's chess. So I know how to. Because I'm a comic, I know how to make a pitch,
Sure.
I get Josh Sneed every year because he comes to spring training. So it's easy. You know what I mean? He wouldn't step foot in a club my size anymore. So he's here every March for spring training, So, and after the pandemic, I was able to get some names that normally wouldn't come to a club my size because they were just looking for work coming out of the pandemic. I got Ian Bagg,
Wow, really? That's awesome.
So you kind of make those moves when you can.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then you kind of always got to be trying to pay attention to who's on the come up, trying to book people as they're on that rise.
Yeah, it's tough. Booking is tough. I've got 52 weeks a year. That's it. You know, and every headliner that's been in the club mostly wants to come back. So now I only have so many dates to give, you know. So there was a while there I was booked out a year and a half. Now it's not so bad. Now it's about a year, but I just, people, hey, I want to come back. Okay, how about next February? And they're like, what? That's where I'm booked. I got to put you into the line.
Yeah.
So it's tough, and
that is
even
tough.
with features and hosts, local comics. There's probably 400 bookable comics in town.
Absolutely.
I've got 52 weekends.
Right.
know? And a lot of headliners now they want to bring their own feature.
Of course.
So there's less time, and then there's plenty of rock solid features in town that want a couple weekends. So it's just that's the tough thing.
Definitely less people that can do a solid 25.
But there's plenty of that are too.
Yeah, for sure. No, there are plenty. Yeah. And Ralphie May said that you can't record comedy, like that it's never. I guess what his point is that it's never going to be what it was in the room.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I guess, that's
I agree.
Interesting.
I mean,
that I think about it.
Yeah.
What are what are the aspects do you think the most important parts of shooting something to make it as good as possible to represent what was happening?
I don't know, man. I'm not a.
Sure.
That's a Brian Kohatsu question. I'm not a video guy.
Sure.
But I definitely agree. I don't watch a lot of specials because I don't enjoy
like
them.
it live.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's nothing like a live experience
Yeah,
of
I
any
totally
art form,
agree.
really, but especially comedy.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
crazy to think about. I had never been to a live comedy show before I started doing comedy.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'd love. I mean, I grew up on the internet. I grew up with YouTube and Netflix, so I'd watched a lot, and for whatever reason, I just never. I mean, I was kind of wild. I was doing drugs there for a while, and stuff like that wasn't even kind of on my mind. But even before that, when I was younger, it just never really, like when I was in college, when I was 18, it never really crossed my mind to go to a club.
I wanted to be I remember when I was a little kid,
Yeah.
like 8, 9, 10, my mom had Bill Cosby albums,
Uh-huh.
and I used to love listening to those. And then I got into like Richard Pryor. I remember Richard Pryor Live. He had the special where he had on the red shirt.
Yeah.
Like I was probably 12 or something.
Wow.
And I listened to that every day.
That was an
Every
education.
And then in the early days of cable TV,
Yeah.
I mean that's how old I am. Gallagher had 16-hour specials back then. So you watched him, and I wanted to get into comedy early on, but I grew up in a small town in Iowa. There was no path to comedy,
right.
So I kind of just spaced it off,
Yeah.
went into music, and then when we moved to Arizona, I was on Craigslist and I saw that Hidden House had like an open mic, and I was like, what? That's crazy. It was like so new to me. Yeah. So I just started going there, and so there was this big gap from when I was a kid that wanted to be a stand-up.
And now it's such a big boom. There's small towns all over with fairly strong comedy scenes. Yeah. I was in Eugene before I moved here. They had a mic every night of the week and shows on the weekend. Yeah. It's a town of like 200,000 people at most.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it is cool.
It's great. It gives comics an opportunity. Now, you can develop bad habits in those rooms too, but it gives you an opportunity. I mean, because comedy it's not like guitar where you can sit at home and practice and get better. It's you're not doing stand-up unless you're on stage in front of people.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and that's stage time. You got to go up all the time.
As much as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. It sucks how hard it is here. I see a lot of new comics struggle to be consistent because there's so many 45-minute drives. Like how many times a week can you spend an hour and a half in the car? But it's what you have to do here. You know, Mike drops 45 minutes from me. House Comedy's 45 minutes from me.
Yeah.
And those are, besides Stir Crazy, the places that are going to book me first in all likelihood. So that's where I got to be hanging out and going.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the same way. When I started pretty late in life, and I had a family, I had a job.
Wow.
So, driving downtown at 9 on a Tuesday so I could try my new 5-minute, it was brutal.
Yeah. And you have to wait.
Yeah. I remember driving to, Laughs in Tucson. I think their open mic is still on Thursday nights.
Yeah, it is. I went just recently. I hosted last week.
I did, I drove down. I remember driving down there to do, I think it was 2 or 3 minutes or whatever.
Sure.
I mean, that was... Can't believe I did
that club's historic, huh?
Yeah, it's been there a long time. Yeah.
A lot of people talk about getting their first opportunities there.
Yeah.
Dan Soder, people like that. Do you have a relationship with them? Like,
well, I know Gary Bynum. He's the owner. His son's Casey. I don't remember his other son's name, but they run it now. But I don't really talk to him much anymore. I interviewed him on my podcast a few years ago, but. I knew him a little bit.
Sure. I'm always curious how much the club owners have relationships and if they're like recommending comics to each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like mainly the ones here in town, or do you have like a lot of friends that are club owners like in like other cities?
No, I have friends that own in other cities. I mean, I know the club owners here because I used to perform there.
Yeah.
But I don't really talk to them much,
Sure. Yeah.
But I have friends that run clubs in Vegas and in California and stuff. And we talk. Of course we talk.
Yeah.
Like anybody else in any aspect of life, you talk shop.
Yeah.
Whether it's, referring comedians or telling crazy stories about how bad one person was or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah, we talk all the time.
Do you get a lot of chaos from comedians at the level? Like, it feels like probably you have to get to a level of famous before you can be so chaotic because you'll just stop booking people.
Yeah, I don't get that too much.
Yeah.
If you're successful enough that you can be that way and be tolerated, you're doing bigger clubs than mine.
Right,
you know what
that
I mean?
makes sense.
Yeah.
So not very many rock star attitudes from the comics you have around. That's good. That's a good.
No. I get that attitude more from hosts and features than I do my headliners. Yeah, the headliners are, they're just appreciate the gig and, it's work.
Yeah. Brian didn't tell me who, but he did tell me somebody was trying to get booked by you. And you're like, sure, you could host this weekend. And they're like, I want a feature. And you're just like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I get all sorts of stuff.
It's so crazy.
But it's, the nonsense is from, people that have just started or aren't even doing, like I get phone calls, voicemails just from people that saying, yeah, I want to come out and go on your stage. I said, what?
Yeah.
I don't even respond.
Right.
I joke around that someday I'm going to make a coffee table book of terrible comic emails that I've gotten.
Yeah. That would be pretty funny. As long as you keep it anonymous, it could be legal. Yeah, right. Yeah. That'd probably sell well, at least just among comedians.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing these days is there's so many people doing comedy that's like an audience base. Like this podcast, in essence, like I don't know how many people that aren't doing stand-up are going to be interested in it. It's mainly for people who want insight into the industry. But it's like I know there's enough open micers that's an audience.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Could be the same thing for something like that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about trying to start. You don't live at West Side. You mentioned you live out by Sean's room. Okay. I'm trying to start another room out here.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find a place. I was going to see if you had advice, but.
You know, I used to run a room prior to Stir Crazy myself. And it was a good room. It was, it was a good show. It was, in my opinion, it was the closest to a comedy club gig, just because of the way I ran it. And it was just it was such an impulse thing of me even starting this room. It was by my house. It was called The Lounge. Mm-hmm. And, it wasn't a real busy place, but it had a really cool vibe. And I just went in on totally impulse, just pulled into the parking lot, asked to talk to the owner and pitched him, hey, why don't you give me a Wednesday night for comedy? And he was excited because their Wednesday night was like, a couple old dudes drinking martinis, and that was their Wednesday night, Yeah. So he had nothing going on. But what made it a good room is he just allowed me he said, you do whatever you need to do. He gave me the room. So, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to turn these TVs off. We're going to put the stage here. We're going to do this. And it was all good. And we built it up into it was literally his best night of the week.
That's awesome.
He had bands on the weekends, and we would do better on Wednesdays. It was great.
I mean, you still do good on Wednesdays.
He was happy. I was happy. Yeah. I got to learn, all the, try out all my little ideas for a room and stuff, and it was great. But then, they kind of forget what it was like before you had your show here. Yeah. And, then it kind of, the quality started going, well, the playoffs are on, so we're going to leave the TVs on tonight. And it's like, oh, here we go. And you just kind of start seeing that.
Sports are the enemy of comedy, man.
Well, any distraction, and we're going to leave the lights on a little lighter tonight. And they stopped letting me do it right.
Right.
And once I kind of started losing the quality control, I just lost interest and I gave it to somebody else.
Just opened a club instead.
Because I was doing both for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I was like, I can do everything I want here. Why would I come be frustrated here? But so it lasted for a while. I think they were continuing, and they closed down during COVID and never reopened, but I think they were still doing it. Yeah. That night. But yeah, if you're going to do a room, just care about it. You know what I mean? And if you take care of the details and set the comics up to do their best, and that will take care of everything.
It reflects, man. It's crazy to me how much better the open mic at Stir Crazy does than every other club mic. But it makes sense when you think about it. Like, I'm not trying to talk shit, but like one of them's outside in a patio with AstroTurf, and you feel like the dogs should be around.
Yeah.
And then the other one's just always empty in comics, and you pay money. And like I was telling somebody, it's like I would pay $5 every week to perform at Stir Crazy. I'd be so happy. But then like when I have to pay at other clubs and it's empty, and I ask, I'm like, is anybody here not a comedian? And nobody makes any noise. It's like, why would I do this to myself?
Yeah. And it's interesting, the open mic. We didn't have an open mic for a while. Yeah. It was a few years before we even did it, because I was trying to think of how did I want to do it, and there was a million rooms already. Right. Why would anybody come to this? And at a club, you gotta pay the bills. You know, as soon as I unlock the doors, I'm thousands of dollars in the hole. I have to make money.
Right.
And so I was trying to figure out, can we charge a cover, maybe a small cover? How are we going to do this? So we started out. It was the first Wednesday of every month, so we were just doing it once.
Yeah.
And $5 to get in, and it started. Started filling up, like it was a thing, and we were talking about maybe making it weekly, and I was like, no, I don't want to, dilute it and all of that. So finally, we tried it once a week, and it kept going, and I don't know, it's turned into a thing. It's a great show.
Totally a thing.
And no, it's great. But it's still an open mic. We barely make any money on that night. But the shows are good. I can't complain. It's become its own little culture, that show. Lamar does a great job, Brian.
Yeah.
It's great.
I was there a couple months ago now, and these ladies were in front of me, and they're trying to buy tickets, and Brian's like, "Hey, I'm sorry, we're sold out," and they're like, "We didn't think that was even a possibility."
Neither did I, bro. Neither did I. It's
like,
great.
He's like, "Yeah, we're actually the only club. We're one of the only clubs that sells out." I was like, "Brian, don't be humble. This is the only club that sells out an open mic."
Yeah, it's cool. You know, I mean, it's a good room for the comics. You know, I think when we first started doing it, I think the spots were 5 minutes each, but now we've made them 3.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody should be doing more than 3. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? When it's open to anybody like that. So we cut it to 3, and you know, you get 7 if you bring somebody, and that just goes, I gotta have people in here, you know.
Right.
So
And that's a good opportunity for people. It's like, if you need like a video with a little bit longer time, bring your 3 people in, pay the $15.
you know, the very first open mic we did, it was this young lady. I don't remember her name. She wasn't a comic. It was her first time on stage.
Yeah.
She literally brought like 60 people or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. She
You're like,
destroyed,
"Thank
of
you,"
course.
you know?
But
Every now and then people just are so kind
yeah.
and awesome as like audience members. I was running a show, and this one lady Venmo'd me like $80 after. And I was
Nice.
like, this covered everything I was going to pay for the comics tonight.
Nice.
I think we should sing the praises of your right-hand man a little bit.
Who's that?
How lucky are you to have Lamar Mitchell Jr. around?
He's great.
Yeah.
He's great.
He
He
runs the best local shows.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
You know, period.
I can't say enough about him.
Yeah.
He when I think it was the open mic that I tapped him for first before
Yeah.
he started doing any, because we didn't used to do third party stuff. But yeah, he was just one of those guys that I could tell, you know, he cared about the craft, and he cared about quality and stuff. And, you know, I knew that I wasn't gonna have time to run the open mic every week. So I asked him, and
he's
I
great
didn't-
at it.
Yeah. I didn't know him very well, but I offered it to him, and he did it, and he's, you know,
Interesting. You didn't know him very well. Yeah.
not really.
Yeah,
Not
interesting.
really. I mean,
yeah.
you know, I ran into him here and there, but I knew he was on the west side, and I needed somebody that, you know,
Sure, that makes sense.
yeah, just because proximity. So,
Makes
but
a
yeah,
big
he
difference.
he's great. I mean,
Yeah, his
you know.
local shows do great. I've been to quite a few. Like
Yeah.
the Blackout show is always fun. The Latin Laughs. I have been telling him he needs to book a show he could put me on.
Yeah.
It's
he's great.
It's literally the new funny, which is comics 2 years or newer, so can't do that. And then all the Blackout and the Latin Laughs and the ladies show.
Yeah. He does a lot of
Ladies shows do well. Here, I was
I'm
at
trying to
Stir
remember.
Crazy. I was at Stir Crazy a couple months ago, and for the open mic, and a female comic from Tucson was there,
Mhm.
and she goes, "Is anybody here a feminist?" And nobody made a sound, and she was like, "I was hoping, I don't know, at least one woman would have said something."
I think people don't know what that word means anymore. You know what I mean? No
it's
one's like,
true.
I
It's
don't,
kind of
I
a
don't want to get
trigger word.
involved.
I don't
You know?
It's like, I believe women are equal, but I don't think I'm a feminist. Let's not. No. But I see a lot of lady shows, and I always wonder how they do. I should go hang out.
Genevieve Rice used to do some female shows at Stir Crazy. I don't remember. We had another one this year. I think Boomer Nichols produced it.
Yeah. I think
it
that
was-
sold out. Yeah.
I think so. I
Yeah,
don't remember.
okay.
Yeah,
That's
all
a
the
good
shows
sign,
kind of
yeah.
blend in.
I feel like
together.
theme shows do well. I get this is what I was trying to get at. It probably sounded like I was going to go on a sexist rant, but
yeah, I mean, you know, everyone's looking for an angle to market, you know, and
it's
you
it's
know.
a hard thing trying to get attention on you.
Yeah, of course.
In
Yeah.
this day and age, there's so much going on. Everybody's doing something,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just tough.
Getting somebody out of their house, man, is, you know, it's tough.
Right. Like, it's weird. I was going to ask you, do you think when you, like, started doing, I guess, when you started in 08,
Something like maybe 09, something
or
like
somewhere in there,
Brian will know. Ask him.
I guess, so maybe let's start with your music. Do you think it was easier to get people out to live events during your music career before the internet was there? Like, you don't have the internet to promote, but also you don't have the internet drawing people away, keeping people in their homes at night, rather. Like, people were probably easier, like, more willing to go out and try to find something to do before
Well,
they had entertainment at
I mean,
home.
I was younger back then, and you know, young people want to go
Go-
out
right,
and be
yeah.
together. So, you
Well,
know.
they did back then. I wonder how, like, I think of my cousins who are 20-ish, and they like staying at home.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, so do I, but that's my age.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's, I wonder.
I don't know. I was just had this conversation the other day about how different it was, you know, when I was coming up without the internet and, you know, even things like Photoshop and audio recording. You didn't have computers to do that stuff, you know. We made flyers by taping pieces together and photocopying them, you know what I mean? And it was just a different time. So I don't know. It was just, I think it's easier to do things now, technology wise, and you know you couldn't have done this, right? You had to have some platform that somebody allowed you to do this, right?
Absolutely.
So technology is an equalizer like that. But the flip side is now you got to break through the noise. It's like how many podcasts are there?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword that way, I guess. But
it really is.
But you know, I also believe that quality bubbles up.
Yeah.
You know, anybody can become famous if they're good. You know, there's no gatekeeper anymore.
I totally believe that, which is cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
There's nobody telling you no. But, you know.
I mean,
there's a lot of people telling you no.
Well, right, but you can do it yourself, you know. And it's, you know, like all I watch is YouTube. I don't watch TV anymore. I watch YouTube channels, you know, all sorts of different content, but you know, it's just somebody with a great idea.
It's because you can have whatever you want whenever you want it.
Yeah.
So.
You know, it's not curated. It's like I find people and, you know, they're just doing their thing and you stumble on and, you know.
Right on. I think there's probably a bunch of people, you know, the 80 comics that listen to this podcast would want me to ask this. What is your best,
whatever you want.
What is your best advice for people who want to get booked at Stir Crazy? Or get booked anywhere. How about let's put that? Let's not do at Stir Crazy.
I can tell you what I think in general, and I can tell you specifically about Stir Crazy.
Sure.
I assume you're talking about local feature. Yeah. So, you know, and again, I want to preface this by saying all the things that you guys are concerned about and trying to do, I was there too.
Right.
So, you know, I know how frustrating it is not to get an email back from a booker. It's annoying, and you think they hate me. They're not thinking about you at all.
Right.
But I used to be the same way. I'd be like, what, you can't respond to my email? No, they can't, because they're getting 1,000 of them.
Emails, yeah.
So, you know, I would say that, especially with me, is I'm kind of aloof.
Yes.
I'm not going to initiate a conversation, but if somebody starts talking, I'll talk to you. So they think, oh, he doesn't like me. I don't know who you are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So don't take that stuff personally.
Yes.
First of all,
don't take anything personally.
No.
Period.
And I tell anybody that asks, send a booking email.
Yeah.
And you know, that way I don't forget about you.
Right.
But don't expect a response, because I don't have all day to get into email exchanges with comics. Do you know what I mean? Because I get a ton of emails.
It would be insane if you tried to communicate.
But just, I'll tell you if I don't want you to email me.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So just send me your email just so I don't forget, you know.
Right.
I have friends that I grew up in comedy with that I forget about.
Of course.
You know, and they're like, how come you never book? I'm like, I forget about you, you know. So it's just about staying in my RAM, you know. When I sit down to book, I usually book like 3 months at a time. That's a chunk that I'll just get it done and get it out. And, you know, I go to my booking email account and I start just kind of glancing through, oh, that's right, I forgot about her, that type of thing. You know what I mean? So, in general, that's how to treat with bookers. Bookers will let you know, or ask them, hey, you know, how often do you want me to send you? Ask them what they want, and they'll appreciate you asking.
Yeah, caring enough to not annoy them. Yeah.
And I would say before you send a dickish email, think twice, because no one's gonna book you if you're being a dick, and that happens a lot. Enough that I'm bringing it up right now.
That's crazy,
you know what I mean?
to me.
So just be professional and just understand that there's just a million people trying to get booked, you know? So that's the biggest thing I would say. Don't get discouraged, and just keep working on your craft. If somebody, you know, and it's about being on a booker's mind, right? And if I'm not at the club and somebody kills it, I'm going to hear about it from my staff, from Brian, from Savannah. Somebody is going to mention it to me. So just do your thing.
Right.
You know, it's things that I appreciate when I see a comic that I truly think respects the craft and they want to get better and they're working hard. That leaves a good feeling with me about that person.
Yeah.
That'll catch my attention.
Nice.
Even if they're just not good yet.
Right.
But I want them to be.
But you see them working at it.
And I keep my eye on them, you know, and I root for them and I can't wait to book them, you know, and there's a number of comics that I would put in that category in town.
That's awesome.
So that's in general with bookers. It's just tough to get in, and, you know, it seems like every club has their little group that they book, right?
Of course.
And, you know, I experienced that same thing, and it was great when you're in that little group, and when for whatever reason you're not in that group, it sucks, you know. Yeah. And I used to hate it, but now I kind of get it because it's just easy, you know what I mean? Every comic that I book that I've never had on stage is a risk.
Yep.
You know, and going back to what I said about, you know, people coming to Stir Crazy without knowing the headliner.
Yeah.
They're coming because, well, last time we were here, we had a good time.
Right.
Right. So I feel a lot of pressure that when the crowd comes in, they have to have a good time. I feel a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, if you go to like one of the bigger clubs, like the Improv, let's say,
Yeah.
and you go see some big name, you know, pick a big name, Christopher Titus, right? You go see him at the Improv, and let's say for whatever reason you didn't like him,
Sure.
right? You tell, oh, you know, we went and saw Christopher Titus. We didn't really like him, right? But if you go to Stir Crazy and you didn't have a good time, you're not going to say, oh, we saw Jane Doe. We went to Stir Crazy. Yeah, we didn't really like it, right? They attach it to the club.
Rather than
I've noticed
comic.
that.
Yeah.
So
it
it's just, I feel a lot of pressure. Like if I walk in the room and the comic isn't doing well, I get very antsy, like, oh, shit, you know, because I want them to have a good time. That's what this is all about. So all that to say, it's very easy to go with who you know is going to do well.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've become less of a risk taker over the years.
It makes sense.
You know?
Especially for you.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you want to be that offensive comic, it's like, fine, draw your audience. That's on you now. Like,
I started laughing. Yeah. So one specific comic popped into my head. That's why I started laughing. Yeah. So that's on my mind, of course. But I do like to see somebody new have their shot, you know, because I remember the first time I got booked to open at the Tempe Improv. I was sick to my stomach all day. Yeah. I mean, it was such a big deal. Like, oh my God, I was so nervous. And, you know, I kind of forget that. I forget how big of a big deal it is to a comic to get a paid spot in a club. You know, totally. I forget that. So I try to remember that.
Yeah.
And I want them to do well. If I'm going to book you, I want you to have the best set you're going to have, you know.
Of course.
But it is easy to get into that. And I'll just throw so-and-so up. I know they're going to do well, you know. So that's in general. That's why clubs do that. That's why they have their little roster. It's just easy.
Yeah.
Now, specifically for Stir Crazy, again, I put a lot of thought into who I book on a show. It starts with the headliner, and then it goes to the feature. Okay, this is my headliner. What are they about? Are they high energy? Are they low energy? Are they sort of, you know, set up punchline? Are they storyteller? Whatever they are. Right. Now I think of a feature that's going to set them up and not step on their toes.
Right. So different enough that it's not ruining their set.
Right. I want them to set up the headliner, right? Yeah. And then from there, then I think about who would a good host be.
Yeah.
And I just kind of have a philosophy of hosts. I like my hosts to keep it clean.
Yeah.
Not because I'm a clean comedy fan in particular, but just that, you know, the host is up there. They're not just doing a set. It's more of a job that you're doing,
of
right?
Course, yeah.
You're trying to turn a group of people into an audience, you know.
Yes.
They're getting settled in, you know, and, you know, I just kind of want to ease them into the night, you know. I don't want to shock them with, hey, my junk, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of my philosophy. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I run my shows. So
Absolutely.
I ask
No,
my
you're
host
not
just
wrong.
to kind of keep it clean for that reason.
Yeah.
So that's how I book it. And you know, there's two phases to it, right? There's getting into a club. That's its own challenge. You know, we can talk for hours about that.
Yeah.
But then also, once you've been in there, not to lose the gig.
Right.
You know, and that's another thing, you know. So do what's asked. You know, I ask my host to keep it clean. So if you don't keep it clean, I'm not going to take you aside and, you know, you're just not going to get booked again.
Right,
You know what I
of
mean?
course.
It's, why am I going to get into it with you? You know,
Yeah.
if you just do what you're asked from any club, you know,
Yeah.
not every club has that as a thing, but I happen to.
Yeah.
Or if you know, don't be a pain in the ass to staff. You know, if someone is a pain to my staff or rude to them, they're not coming back.
Yeah.
I don't care how funny you are.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Despite everything you just said, the easiest way into a club is for the staff to like you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely hear from my staff, you
Right.
know, if whether it be their comedy, they really liked them or they didn't like them, or how they, you know, were treated.
Right, of
I hear all
course.
of it,
Yeah.
you know.
Of course.
So yeah, it's just those two different phases of getting in and staying in.
Staying in.
Yeah.
When you say clean, can you be specific about what that means for you? Because like I feel like clean is such a dubious concept in comedy sometimes.
Yeah, clean's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, you know, look, and this is what I say to comment. They're not kids, they're adults,
Right.
But I guess something as far as we're just talking about host.
Yes, absolutely.
But it could be the feature. If I have a clean headliner,
You
I'm
need
not
a clean
gonna
feature.
put a
Yeah.
filthy headliner or
filthy
feature before the
just
headliner.
ruin
Do you know what I mean?
the show,
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
yeah.
And then, so I would say, you know, something that could be on a late night TV set.
So that's a good policy.
Yeah. I mean, if you drop an F-bomb, no, I mean, that's not,
Good.
you know, things
yeah.
are going to fall apart.
Right.
But I just like to kind of ease the audience into it. Let's get settled. Let's have fun. You know, one time I had a headliner who he wasn't dirty. He you know, used language, but he wasn't dirty. But the host was so dirty, we had a couple get up to leave.
Right.
Because they thought, well, if this is starting out like this, you know, and
we're not going to enjoy this.
and I stopped them at the door. I was like, look, it's not good. That's the worst. And they were just done. So I gave them tickets to another show.
And that's when you learn, you're like, I want all my hosts not doing that.
Well, this host was told not to you know, to be clean, but it's like, I mean, think about that. You're a host and you walked a table.
Right.
I mean, come on, man.
It's bad.
Yeah, it's bad enough
Only
if
the
a headliner
headliner should be walking people, and that shouldn't be happening.
So anyway, that's why I do that.
I asked because, like, Keith Ellis and I were talking about being clean, and he's really big on being clean. But then he also has jokes that are basically like, this Mexican stole a car. And you're like, well, is that clean? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's not,
no,
you know.
I know it's dubious sometimes, I guess is how I put it. It's
I
very-
wouldn't go that far. I mean, it's not. It's I don't know.
Like, I don't think that shouldn't be clean, but it's also it's an interesting, like, where there's probably is a level of racial joke where it wouldn't be clean anymore.
Oh, I don't know. I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know how much
It's in the
I
eye
don't know
of
how
the
much
beholder, you know?
offensive relates to clean, I guess, is what I was getting at. It's like, can it be clean but
No,
still
I'm not.
be-
I don't care. I'm not. It's not necessarily not being offensive,
Right,
As
right.
long
It's
as
just
it's
like-
funny.
right.
But it just, you know, like I said, it can set a tone. You know,
Right, definitely, like, it's important not to be, like, overtly sexual, like, as the host.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Yeah, you
it's
know.
too much. Or just in general.
Well, no. Well, look, the cleaner you can be in comedy, the more work you're going to get,
Period.
for sure.
Yeah.
Now, like for instance, with me, I wasn't really a dirty comic. I didn't have any sexual jokes. I had a couple language, used a little bit of language, but I was actually a lot cleaner on stage than I am off stage.
Okay,
I have a terrible potty mouth.
Sure.
But I didn't like doing clean shows just because I just didn't like that on you know.
Yeah.
And
Heard the audiences can be weird.
Yeah, and I did some corporate gigs, which pay great, you know, but I didn't like that. That wasn't for me, you know. But if it is, and you like to do that, you can make a living doing clean comedy for sure, you know.
Right on. Any other advice you have for new comics starting out? Just like a general summary, sum up. Last question.
Well, one thing that I recommend, and this, you know, this is for a lot of things in life, but especially comedy, is, you know, set yourself some goals or some what you think you want to do, and that can always change. You're going to learn new things, you're going to be exposed to new things, and that can change. But work towards a goal to just to keep you on a path. I see a lot of very funny comics that just kind of spin around the open mics for 10 years.
Yeah,
you know, and and that's if that's your thing and you want to just hang at the open mics and be around friends and hang that way, that's great.
Sure.
You know, you don't have to pursue any particular thing, but just kind of figure out what you want to do and work toward that.
Yeah.
You know, using clean comedy as an example, you know, if you think I want to make a living doing corporate comedy and just do comedy for professional. Okay. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, the cleaner you can be. So write clean jokes.
Yeah.
So don't go to an open mic and do a bunch of dirty jokes, because you can't use that to further your goal. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So pick out what you want to do, and maybe you want to be an actor, maybe you want to be a writer for somebody else, whatever it is, and just kind of do things to help you along that path. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Now that you said that, I have one more question. Sure. Actually. What do you think? Would you say, besides just actually being funny, which is obviously the first requirement for doing comedy, would you say that networking is probably the most important part of moving from being an open micer to a professional comic?
Well, I think it's important just because, you know, you have to be ready for opportunities, and the more people you know, the more opportunities you're going to have.
Yeah.
You know, going back to comedy festivals, I, you know, stayed in contact with a lot of people I met at festivals, and I ended up booking him when I opened a club, you know? So you just never know what opportunities are going to fall into your lap. And if you just sit at home waiting for somebody to call you, it's not going to happen.
Right.
You know, I get that all the time. You know, comic, how come you never call me? Did you email me? No. What do you, you know, you think I'm going to drop by and see if you know?
Right.
So you have to get out somehow. Now, you don't have to necessarily physically show up and network. You know, you can release YouTube videos, TikTok videos, whatever.
Helps though. People people they know in person.
Absolutely. You know, so yeah, I think that's huge. I'll tell you a funny story. So I get random headliner emails all the time.
Okay.
And the idea that a club is going to book a random headliner they've never heard of from a booking email, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
You know, there's just too many comics. But I get them all the time, you know, from all over the country. When I was doing comedy, this is probably 12 years ago, I did a guest spot at a club outside of Denver, which is no longer there. And the headliner was Derek Linguinis.
Okay.
Very funny guy from Chicago.
Okay.
And I did a guest spot on the midnight show on Saturday. They were animals. But he was very funny. And I was new to comedy, but he was just very nice to me for no reason. He just was, and I always appreciated that. So fast forward, you know, years later, I get an booking email from Derek Linguinis. He had no idea who I was. He was just trying to get a gig at a comedy club, you know? And I was like, I remember that guy. So I immediately responded. I immediately booked him. And, you know, I didn't tell him who I was or anything. And then when I picked him up from the airport, I told him, I said, I did a guest spot and you were just really nice. And that's why and he laughed. He's like, that was like the easiest gig I've ever gotten. He you know, but it was because
he had been nice to you one time.
Once, and I always remembered that, you know.
That's such a comic.
But but that's what I mean. It's it's personal, you know. I mean, we're all human beings, and you know, I just always appreciated that.
That's awesome. It's funny how being nice can make such a big difference.
Yeah.
I said it on stage the other day about a comic. I was like, this next comic's very funny. And more importantly, she's been incredibly kind to me, which, as much as we pretend otherwise, is more important.
Well, sure. We're all humans. You know?
Yeah.
We're all humans.
We do pretend being funny is more important, but
Well,
not always.
No, of course not.
But also, you should be able to be mean, with comedy.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, you want hopefully every comedian to be funny, but you know, if personally they're a pain to be around, there's plenty of funny people. That's not the only ticket to get in the door. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't know.
Yeah. Really enjoyed talking with you, man.
Yeah,
Is there anything you want to plug besides Stir Crazy Comedy Club?
No.
All right, the show's Wednesday through Sunday. Come catch a show at Stir Crazy.
Thanks,
Thank you,
man.
dude.
You bet.